Good evening from Washington. I'm Mehdi Hasan in for Chris Hayes. First, it was Portland. Now, federal agents from the Department of Homeland Security, the agency that was thrown together after 9/11 to protect the nation from terrorism, are being dispatched to Seattle. They claim to protect federal property. This comes after federal agents were sent to Portland in early July, where they've been using war tactics against American protesters, firing tear gas at crowds and throwing demonstrators into unmarked cars. So why did they deploy those agents to Portland in the first place? Well, according to this list from Acting Homeland Security Secretary Chad Wolf, graffiti incidents were a big part of it. Yes, federal agents in military gear are being deployed to fight graffiti. Last night on Trump TV, the president said he could send a massive force of tens of thousands of agents into American cities.
We could solve it. If they invited us in, we'd go in with 50,000, 75,000 people. We would be able to solve it like you wouldn't believe and quick. But they just don't want to ask, maybe for political reasons, but they don't want to ask. It's a disgrace.
When it comes to the coronavirus, there is no federal response. It's every state for themselves. But when it comes to fighting vandalism or protecting statues, he's ready to send 75,000 agents of the federal government. And Seattle is next on the list. Customs and Border Protection has already sent tactical border officers ahead of protests expected this weekend. Now, I've worked around the globe. I've interviewed prime ministers and government officials, dictators, despots, authoritarians. And I think it's time in America that we finally have a proper conversation about the F word. No, not that one. Fascism. I know, it's really controversial. People get very uncomfortable when you mention it. But to borrow a line, if not now, when? And if not us, the free press, then who? For far too long, we have shied away from saying the F word. For a lot of people, calling Donald Trump a fascist was just ad hominem, a lazy political insult. It was the liberal who cried wolf. And yet, look what happened the moment he took office. There was the Muslim ban, and the very fine people in Charlottesville, and then the kids he threw into cages and camps. But it's not stopped. Those were not isolated incidents. Just last month, the president had protesters, as well as reporters, outside the White House, tear-gassed and beaten, so that he could go for a stroll and have a photo op holding a Bible outside a nearby church. And we were told not to call that fascism either. Now, the president is ordering a surge of federal agents into US cities and talking about Chicago the same way that George W. Bush once talked about Fallujah. The Daily Beast reports that the president envisioned an ostentatious, camera-ready show of force in Chicago. He wanted to go after what he saw as violent gang leaders, flush them out of hiding in ways that would have them shaking in their boots like they never had before, and have alleged perpetrators marched out in front of the news cameras. Are we still saying this is not at all reminiscent of fascism? Look, I get it. Fascism is associated with dictatorships, with mass murder, and we've not had either yet here in the US, thank God. Although, like with every good authoritarian, there is the question of whether President Trump will leave office when the time comes. Just last night, the Democratic presidential nominee Joe Biden warned that Trump will try to indirectly steal the election. So, the growing authoritarianism and state-sponsored violence in this country should worry you. The scenes from Portland, Oregon should set off alarm bells. But thankfully, some Americans have clearly seen the threat and are standing up to it. Like Peter Buck, a grandfather from Washington state who purchased a leaf blower and brought it to Portland last night to help disperse the tear gas being fired on protesters. And a group of women known as the Wall of Moms who took to the streets of Portland this week to stand between federal agents and protesters. Heroes. We also have elected mayors resisting the president, telling him to stay out of their cities.